Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Wednesday. Sorry I'm not there with you today, but I know you'll do a great job with our substitute and you'll make me proud. So today, hopefully you've already completed your bell work, which should be on the board. Then you're going to take some notes with this video, and then you're going to do a writing activity. You will turn in your assignment at the end of class today. So today we're going to talk about the new learning and the new types of knowledge that emerged during the Renaissance that changed how people saw the world. So let's get started. Our essential question for today is, how did the rebirth of Greek and Roman knowledge change life in Europe after the Renaissance? You're going to copy the slides with the highlighted titles, so you're not going to need to write everything. You may want to have your substitute pause the video at certain points so that you can make sure you get everything down. This video is also posted on Edmodo, so if you miss something, skip a line and you can come back and get it later. So as a review, in the Middle Ages, learning in Europe belonged to religious leaders. No one else was literate. Certainly the rulers were not literate. Peasants definitely were not literate. So all of the worldview and all of the knowledge belonged to the church. And so any information that the lower classes got about how the world worked was filtered through that lens of the church. So they always had this view that the purpose of this life is to do what you're supposed to so that you can get into heaven, so that you can be a good Christian. There was very little focus on the mortal world, the physical world. In Asia and the Middle East, however, knowledge, learning, invention, technology continue. So when we talk about that loss of Greek and Roman knowledge that happened during the Middle Ages, that really only applies to Europe. Asia and the Middle East were still coming up with new and different things, and they were still innovating and learning and studying. So how do we get from Europe not knowing everything to them rediscovering that knowledge from Greece and Rome? The Crusades. So what leads to renewed interest in classical learning? Well, when those European Christian soldiers come to the Middle East during the Crusades, they rediscover or re-encounter that knowledge that basically was being held safe by the Arab cultures in the Middle East. And that leads to that rediscovery of Greek and Roman knowledge about mathematics and literature and art and all of those things that we talked about when we talked about Greece and Rome as being major ancient civilizations. In addition, especially after the Black Plague, there's going to be a desire for new explanations of the world because people are losing faith in the ability of the Christian church to explain and help them manage their world. So the new explanation that they come up with is this philosophy called humanism. So humanism is a Renaissance philosophy that focuses on the value of the individual. So instead of focusing on your society, instead of focusing on the afterlife, instead of focusing on a God or a higher power, they're focusing on the goodness and value of the individual. So humanists believe that people are inherently good, and so they should be celebrated, that goodness should be encouraged and developed. So humanism focuses on individual worth, on public service, and on development of a variety of skills and talents. So as a comparison between the medieval worldview and the humanist Renaissance worldview, in the medieval view of the world, the church was above everything. So what they said was law, what they said was believed to be literally the word of God. And what individuals wanted was considered to be probably sinful and therefore doesn't matter under that Christian uneducated philosophy. So in Renaissance thought, the Catholic Church as it existed then was believed to be very rigid and outdated. They believed that the things that the church was telling them to do weren't relevant in their modern society. And they believed that individual desires and talents were important and should be celebrated. So, if you want to be an artist, whereas the church prior would have said, if you want to be an artist, you have to paint, scenes from the Bible, or else your art is sinful. In the Renaissance school of thought, they said, no, develop your talent. And that's one reason why we get this huge explosion of art and literature and invention and science and thinking during the Renaissance, because people were encouraged to go after whatever it was that they were interested in. So there are going to be new ways of learning. During the Middle Ages, if you wanted to get any kind of education at all, typically you entered the clergy, so you became a monk or a nun, and you would study in a monastery. And your education would be very heavily religious. So during the Renaissance and during the humanist era, people are going to learn through observation of the natural world. We're going to see people observing the stars and observing how animals act and observing how the human body works and measuring things and, I mean, all kinds of observational thinking, the kind of stuff that you usually do in your science classes. We're going to see that for the first time. And then we're going to see the application of mathematics and science to everyday life. So we're going to see architecture that uses math in new ways. We're going to see medicine looking more like it does today, as opposed to, remember that picture of the plague doctor I showed you guys when we talked about the Black Plague, where he had like the bird mask with the herbs in the beak, and they believed that they could like pray away the plague. So medicine after the Renaissance is going to look much more like the medicine that we know today, where it's based on the structures of the human body. And then we're also going to see application of math and science to art. So let's look at that. So on the left of this image, you're going to see a medieval depiction of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. So you'll notice that this image looks very flat and that Jesus and Mary are bigger than all of the other figures in the picture. So in the Middle Ages, all art was very two-dimensional like this. And the scale or the size of things in comparison to one another wasn't based on how it actually looked. It was based on how important those figures were to the image. So because Mary and Jesus are the central figures in this image, that's what it's a picture of, they are much bigger than the other figures. So medieval art doesn't look very realistic because it is so flat, because the scale is kind of weird. If you look on the right, there's a very classical Renaissance painting called The School of Athens by Raphael. We've looked at this painting before in here, but you can look at it and see that they make use of what we call perspective, which is drawing art in a way so that it looks three-dimensional, so that it looks like it appears in real life. You can imagine that if you were really there, if you were really in this setting, the School of Athens, and you took a photograph, it would look very much like this image. So the way people are able to create images like this is by using angles, by using measurements, by using mathematical scale. One of the most famous artists from this time period is a guy named Leonardo da Vinci. And Da Vinci was what we really call a Renaissance man. So he was interested in a lot of different things, from math to science to writing to art. And he created this image that we know as the Vitruvian Man. Vitruvius was a Greek mathematician, and the Vitruvian Man is Leonardo da Vinci's depiction of a male human with what he believes are the ideal proportions. So in the Renaissance, they really believed that, like, when we find people attractive, it has a lot to do with the proportions of their face and their symmetry and the lines of their body. And a lot of scientists believe that today still. And so, according to Da Vinci, after studying all of these Greek and Roman texts about anatomy and biology and measurements and art and aesthetics, he created this image of this guy that apparently has the proportions or ratios of an ideal human being. The point here is that he's using math and science to create an image, to create art. So, toward the end, well, middle end of the Renaissance, in the 1450s, a man named Johann Gutenberg in Northern Europe is going to adapt a Chinese invention to create the printing press. Gutenberg is credited with inventing printing. He did not invent it. He adapted an invention that the Chinese had already come up with, but, you know, be that as it may. So with the printing press, that causes a major rise in literacy across Europe. In the Middle Ages, books were incredibly expensive because people had to hand copy them, so it could take months and months to produce one book. With the printing press, it's very much like a printer today, where it churns out copies and copies of the same thing. Pretty much what you would do is lay out letters to make a page, and then roll ink on it, put a piece of paper down, and it comes back with, you know, a mirror image that's a perfect print. And so you could print page after page after page after page. And so Gutenberg is credited with printing copies of the Bible and spreading literacy and Christianity, but he also printed other texts. So with Gutenberg's invention, education and literacy became much more accessible to all kinds of people across Europe. That's going to contribute to that improving economy that we talked about, and it's also going to contribute to the Protestant Reformation, which we're going to talk about tomorrow and Friday. Okay? So, that's all I've got for you guys today. Again, if you missed anything, make sure you get it from Edmodo. You guys are now going to work on a packet to review some of these Renaissance ideas. And you're going to turn that in at the end of class. So make sure you do a good job. Make sure you make me proud. Make sure you're nice to the sub, okay? If you need me, shoot me an email, and I will be back tomorrow. Make good choices, guys. Bye.